Hiya, I just got back from the EICMA show in Milan where the new Norton motorcycles were launched. And before I went, I really wasn't feeling positive about Norton's new direction. But when I got there, I had a long chat with someone fairly senior at Norton, and I think I've got a better idea of their strategy now. And I believe I can see what they're aiming for with their new bikes and logo. I still don't completely buy into it, but I'll show you some footage I got of the bikes and I'll explain what I mean. So the questions I asked were, why did they change the Norton logo and where has the link to Norton's heritage gone? I also asked which countries are they launching into, will Norton return to racing, and what's happening with the 961 Commando. I also got a few technical details about the development of their new V4 engine. So Norton's announced 4 new bikes based on 2 platforms. There's the Manx and Manx R, the Atlas and Atlas GT. To be honest, I'd pretty much already formed my opinion of these bikes before I got there. To me, they looked bland and no different really to any other bike out there. I was even starting to think the bikes and the new logo might have been designed by AI. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it did look to me like Norton were cutting their ties with their heritage completely, which made me wonder, why did TVS Motor buy Norton in 2020 if they were going to change everything about the brand anyway? So when I got to EICMA, I looked for someone to talk to on the Norton stand, and I started by asking them, where is the link to Norton's heritage now? I said, apart from the Manx and Atlas names, which do have historic links to Norton, I wasn't seeing it. And what I was told was quite interesting. Their view is when we see a Norton from the 50s or 60s, we're seeing it through the lens of it being a classic bike, old school cool, right? That kind of thing. But really, if you go back to the 50s and 60s, Norton were actually some of the most modern bikes out there. They had some of the most advanced technology for the time. And now Norton want to go back to those roots. Their view is that Norton's heritage, or their DNA as they call it, is to be modern and forward-looking. They actually believe these new bikes will start to make some competitor bikes look quite dated. And in 5 years' time, they even think some competitors might start to look like the new Nortons we see here. So Norton want to go back to what they did in the past, which is looking to the future. And for that reason, the 961 Commando has gone. In my opinion, that bike was an evolutionary dead end anyway. It had a very old-fashioned engine, and to be fair, it wouldn't fit their new direction. I was also told they didn't believe the classic Norton logo would work on their new bikes. And I have to say, the new logo is starting to grow on me a bit now. Now I've seen it on the metal. Don't get me wrong, personally, I don't think the old logo would have looked completely out of place on these bikes. But I do understand they're taking Norton in a new direction and they want the logo to reflect that. Personally, though, I don't believe the bikes themselves look cutting edge. Of course, it's just my opinion. I think they look fine, but nothing out of the ordinary. Some of the styling details I like. For example, the tail light on the Manx looks pretty cool, but I do still think you could put any badge on the bikes and you wouldn't necessarily know they were Norton. I was told they probably won't cut the old logo out completely. We'll most likely still see it on things like t-shirts, baseball caps, that kind of thing. But for now, Norton were displaying merchandise with their new logo, which makes sense because they're really pushing it. I then got into some technical discussions about the development of the V4 engine in the Manx. What I was told is Norton developed the engine more around torque than power. So the Manx engine develops 206 horsepower, but their view is whether a bike gets 199 horsepower, 206 or 215, once you get to those kind of figures, it doesn't really matter. Most riders probably aren't going to notice the difference anyway. I was told Norton did a lot of testing with competitor bikes and they recorded where in the RPM range potential customers were riding. And what their data showed was that only 1% of riding was at RPM higher than 9,000. Apparently, 80% of the riding was done between 3,000 and 8,000 RPM. So Norton designed the engine to have maximum torque in that range. So they believe the Manx feels more powerful than their competitors, at least in the RPM range that customers typically ride. Their new V4 gets 130 Newton meters of torque. For comparison, a Ducati Panigale V4 has more power at 216 horsepower, but less torque at 121 Newton meters. And I was also told that compared to a Ducati or Aprilia V4, the Norton engine sound is different and there's more grip from the rear wheel than those bikes. Apparently, both of those differences are partly because the Norton has a different firing order to the Aprilia and Ducati engines. Does that sound reasonable to you? I don't have an engineering background, so I couldn't really challenge those statements. And of course, no one outside Norton has ridden these bikes yet, so all this will have to wait for in-depth reviews. By the way, the Atlas models have a 585cc parallel twin, so it's going to be a completely different proposition to the Manx. When you look at the Atlas and Atlas GT, there's not a lot of difference between them apart from the wheels and suspension. But the Atlas GT is definitely the more road-focused of the two. It's got 17-inch steel wheels, front and rear. The base Atlas is more of an off-road bike. It's got spoked wheels with a 19-inch rim up front and 17 at the rear. I don't think it's a true off-roader, though. It's probably suited to gentle green lanes, but we'll see once the reviews are out. And it was nice to see some luggage options as well, which we've not had before from Norton. Now, Norton haven't released any prices for these bikes yet, but my assumption is the Manx is the top of the range model, right? It's designed to compete against the Ducati Panigale and Street Fighter. I think the Atlas is probably aiming towards bikes like the Aprilia Touareg 660 and Ducati Desert X, so I reckon we can expect to see similar pricing to those bikes. I then asked if Norton would go racing again in the future. What I was told is they don't really feel the need to because TVS Motor, Norton's parent company, already does a lot of racing, mainly in India, and the Manx is designed for the street, not for racing. But the person I spoke to said that maybe in a couple of years we might see Norton back at the TT, but I definitely won't be holding my breath on that one. The discussion then moved on to where the bikes are to be built. To be honest, I don't really care where a bike is built, so long as it's made to a high standard. And the person I spoke to was a bit coy, but my understanding is the Atlas will be made in India, which would make sense, right? It would help to keep the cost of the bike down. And I believe the Manx will be largely made in the new Solihull factory in England. I also mentioned that I didn't see so much playing to the Britishness of the brand anymore. In the past, the Union Jack flag was often prominently displayed on the 961 Commando, Dominator and V4 bikes. But then I was shown the detailing in the carbon fibre on the Manx, which I hadn't noticed before. It's quite subtle, but it's there. It's just a little less obvious than we would have seen in the past. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, please do me a big favour, give me a thumbs up on the content. Really appreciate it. It helps spread the word to other people who might also find it interesting. Thanks. I then asked about Norton's plans to launch into markets outside the UK. What I was told is they're building up facilities in America, Germany, Italy, France and Spain ready to launch there. Those are going to be the first markets, but I wasn't told when they're planning to launch there. And the marketing in Milan was huge. Norton definitely dominated the advertising at EICMA. But even in the main shopping areas in Milan city centre, adverts were popping up on the large electronic screens. So they really were going all out to push this relaunch of Norton. Before I went, I was a bit concerned. The bikes were only being shown in grey on the Norton website and they all looked a bit bland and corporate. But here's some colour samples for the Atlas, and I have to say the bikes do look a lot nicer in the metal. However, personally, I don't see yet that Norton has made any great leap forward with these bikes compared to the competition, at least in terms of looks and technology. And to be honest, I just don't see any compelling reason for anyone to choose Norton over any other brand at the moment. I think Norton missed a bit of a trick really with not having a bike similar to the Commando. That bike had its issues, but at least it was different from any other motorcycle out there. Perhaps the difference between Norton and their competitors will become more apparent when we see and hear these new bikes being ridden. And maybe it just takes time to rebuild that in their DNA. So, should you buy one of these bikes? I don't know about you, but at the moment I wouldn't. I'm reserving judgment until I can get to ride them and also to find out what the prices are going to be, of course. I just don't see any reason to get rid of my 961 Commando. It's full of character and strikes a nice balance between the classic Nortons and the new. And I don't know about you, but my decision to buy a bike comes as much from the heart as from the head. It's an emotional decision. And these new bikes don't move me in the same way the Commando does. So what do you think about these new bikes? Do you think Norton's on the right track? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks a lot for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.